Welcome to Research Matters, the podcast where we discuss research matters and why they matter. My name is Joshua Davis with the Office of Research at Kennesaw State University. And today we are joined by Dr. Erica Holliday and her husband, Garrett Guy. Erica is an addiction and recovery science researcher. He's a handyman in recovery. Today we're going to talk about her research, why it's important, and how it brought the pair together.
There are biological differences that we truly haven't uncovered, because I was doing the same thing as all of my friends and they wound up dead or in jail, and I got a PhD. So I really wanted to know the nitty gritty of our DNA and our biology that was driving some of these differences.
Welcome. So I guess, Erica, if you don't mind, start us off introducing who you are.
I am Dr. Erica Holliday. I am the director of the Neurobiological Examination of Addiction, Recovery, and Related Disorders, or as we call it, the NERD Lab. So all of my students are known as nerds. I think 1 in 4 Americans have had personal experience with addiction or substance use related disorders. The long-term prospects for recovery are not great. I'm a unique researcher in that I study from cellular and molecular models up to rodent models, up to the human models, and also study community-based systems with recovery and recovery partnerships. So I have a very unique perspective that I think is going to transform the way that we understand addiction and the way that we treat long-term recovery.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. Garrett, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Garrett Guy. I am a handyman, also Erica's husband. So I am right now just a typical handyman. In the past, I've dabbled in, I would say, almost everything. I'm a health freak. My passion was studying the body. Went to KSU from 2008 to 2012, started studying exercise health science. So that was kind of my passion, and end up in construction for the last 20 years. So that's what I currently do.
So Erica, so what brought you to this type of research? Why did you start down this path?
So earlier in life, I knew I always wanted to study addiction because when I was in high school, we had to do a math project for calculus, I think, pre-calculus. And we had to find a natural phenomenon occurring in the real world that you could model in math. And that's when I stumbled across the National Institute of Drug Abuse website. And I saw for the first time that the release of dopamine in the brain follows a sine wave, and it follows your moods. So the more that's released, the more euphoric you feel, but then you come down and crash, and then it comes back and normalizes. And in that moment, I was like, oh, I get it. This is why people chase that, to get back to where they were, and while they'll give up everything. And it was like, I want to study this. And I had no idea how to do it. So I failed out of my high school, went to community college, wound up at a state school, fell into my first behavioral neuroscience lab studying nicotine and adolescent brain development. And I was like, oh, I don't need to be a psychologist where I talk to people. I can study these things that I'm really good at because I was really good at biology and actually help people. So I did that for a long time. I did my PhD in rodent models. I did my postdoc in rodent and cellular models, and did a lot of molecular cloning to study cocaine addiction. Well, when I was getting ready to euthanize a group of rats that I had just gone through a cocaine administration procedure, so they were dependent, I got a phone call that one of my friends from back home had died from a fentanyl overdose. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, how is this actually helping? My friends are dying. What am I doing? So in that moment, I was like, I got to make a change. I went through this whole existential crisis because at the same time that happened, the National Institute of Drug Abuse was moving more towards drug discovery to treat drug addiction. And that's where I was like, there is a big disconnect between my field and the people that are my friends that are dying. So about a year after that, a position opened up at Kennesaw where they wanted to have a researcher linked with the collegiate recovery program. And I was like, why not? Why, you know what? I've been studying adolescence. I've been studying addiction. Maybe I need to go be more impactful with humans.
Well, I'm sorry for your loss in regards to your friend. And I guess, yeah, it changed your direction. You wanted to help humans, souls. Okay, so how long ago was that when that transformation happened?
So that was in 2020 when I shifted into recovery.
Okay, and then you were here,
Research.
and you showed up here. Yeah.
Right. But then in 2023, the vivarium was done with construction at Kennesaw. So I had the opportunity to shift back into rodent models. So now I do both.
Okay, so can you tell us more about the research you're doing today?
So what a loaded question, because that's a lot. Right now, I am running a collaboration project called Biomarkers of Executive Function, where I'm looking at early life stress and current stress and gene interactions with substance use in college students and how it impacts their executive function, or like how well they can perform goal-related tasks and also impulsivity measures. That's one study, and that's to map onto some of the rodent work that I'm doing as well. Another study that I'm running with my master's student is looking at impairments in classical conditioning using eye blinking with the air puff, and you pair a tone with the air puff. And we want to know if individuals that have been exposed to THC have impairments. The study that I'm doing with rats is to identify whether early life stress in the form of stressing out the mother, so maternal stress, will impact uniquely the learning and memory circuits in the adolescent brain that could also be a risk factor for substance use.
Okay, so you guys met while you were working on this. So where does that come in? What's the story there?
Sure. So one phenomenon I was studying in my postdoc is known as cue reactivity. So when you are using substances, cues in your environment can predict the substance availability, and then that can cause a lot of neuroadaptations to occur. So it can induce craving if you're re-exposed to the cue that had previously been associated with substance use. And what I studied in my postdoc specifically was how that effect strengthened over a certain amount of time. So if you made the rats dependent on cocaine and then you took them off of it for 30 days, they would come back with higher responding to that cue that predicted the drug previously. And I explained that to Garrett, and he was like, "Oh my God, is that what's happening to me all the time?"
So which date was that on?
That was actually in February of 2021.
Wow.
I remember that. I remember that conversation because I was showing you the PowerPoint, and you were like, "Are you studying me?"
Oh, you
Well, yeah, it's the whole understanding of like, well, the first 6 months together, I thought she was just gathering straight up data on me doing some sort of experiment. But I mean, just the knowledge that she had and the education that she brought was something else.
But he made me realize, and then some of my early work here with the Recovery Center is that what I knew at the molecular level had not been translated into the recovery stuff.
Oh.
And so that's where I'm trying to bridge
So
it.
what's not working?
So the issue with recovery science as a whole is that for 20 years, from like the late 90s until the 2020s and even now, we knew a great deal about the brain during addiction because we had to move the stigma away from it being a character flaw to it actually being a brain disorder, a chronic relapsing brain disorder. So we know a lot about how drugs of abuse affect the brain. We know a lot about what happens to the brain during addiction. We know nothing about the brain when it comes to recovery. So we're putting people into
that makes sense. Yeah.
that the only endpoint is that they have stopped using drugs, and that's the only metric. And they're not looking at long-term recovery. And we don't know how the brain is healing itself. So that's where some of my research is going now, is looking at what happens during those long-term changes and how to make them more effective for the population and not just one individual.
Can I interject real quick? You get the bare minimum with that. Like you get the bare minimum, you don't get any education on it. You'd say, you're doing this, you're screwed up, this is what you need to do. And you don't get an understanding of, hey, this is probably why you're doing it. You don't get that information.
So with the bridging, it sounds like the interventions and detox programs are missing the human element.
You're like cattle in a farm system. When you go to a state-funded facility, they get you in, get you out. It's all generic stuff. It's not like, hey, we're going to make this plan based on you.
They got a system that's made that's specific, and they're using the same, and I'll say it again, maybe it's the wrong word, interventions that are just repeated. These are the things we've done in the past. We keep doing them. Are there a group of scientists that are doing that regularly around the world?
Kind of.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they're abstinence models. The problem is in rats, we just take them off the drug. And in humans, you've got the whole shame aspect, and I can't replicate that in a petri dish.
Oh, that's complicated. I mean, how do you measure? You can measure shame, I'm assuming, maybe.
There are tons of scales for shame. The real issue is that efficacy for treating addiction is whether or not people stop taking the drug. And that's it. Like for a medication to be approved for cessation by the FDA, the only metric is 100% abstinence. And then no one looked at what was going on after that. And now we have a lot of predatory recovery programs out there.
So, Garrett, I guess, so you're getting this information from Erica. What did it do to you?
So it was very complicated information at first, honestly. I mean, it's really and truly from like having to ask her to put it into plain English. It has kept my mind clear with the help of her. Like it took me, probably 3-4 years before I could actually openly talk about it without having any issue, any craving, anything like that. But just again, I go back to her just being the backbone with that understanding, just is what still thrives me.
Right. And she saw you for who you are.
Correct. And she met me, like I said, when I was had a relapse or two, but it was, I mean, she was there for me still. Like, I mean, it was weird getting the education aspect at first. It was. I mean, it was. It really was.
I'm just sitting here thinking too, I mean, and I'm assuming she helped you see yourself differently.
Oh, when she made me see my true self. That literally my true self. I'll tell you,
undiagnosed ADHD.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I don't know if it stemmed from my use or what, but she opened my eyes all the way. Because during that whole time I was blinded. My family was there. They didn't know what was going on with me, and they didn't have any of that knowledge. But again, where I actually was able to open my eyes and I kept telling myself for probably 2 years prior to I stopped. I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Didn't have motivation, but I'm still blinded. So then whenever she just literally opened my eyes up, and then I was able to persevere and actually be like, I'm going to defeat this.
Yeah. So what do you mean, finding your true self?
Finding my true self, so I was extremely held back. I was holding myself back while I was using. I didn't have any self-worth. It was a constant state of depression, I guess you could say. But finding my true worth, my self-value was I'm as good as anybody else out there. I could do what anybody else can. I'm the only one holding myself back. That's opening my eyes and finding my true value. So
when did you guys get married?
1/5/22.
She changed your life.
Honestly, 100%.
What does she give you with this perspective, the research she spent? How many years of your life before you met him?
Oh, Mike, I started at 18. I'm 38 now. So 20 years now I've been in this field.
So all those years of her not knowing the impact. So, yeah.
Beyond knowledge, the best backbone I could absolutely have. Beyond support, just knowing the ins and outs of everything that comes with addiction.
So tell us what that means to you. What are the ins and outs of addiction?
The struggles with it, the cravings. I struggled because I went into recovery. I went to a detox program, and after that, I relapsed a few times, and I didn't have the support I needed. I mean, really and truly, it comes down to the support, in my opinion. The knowledge of knowing that, because I told you that I was I am still a health freak. I really am. And just knowing how it affects the body, getting that understanding, that drives me. I didn't know how truly it was messing my body up.
Interesting.
One of the reasons that we got together very quickly, and we were engaged within a year of knowing each other, was because I openly talked to Garrett about what I studied, and Garrett was also in recovery. And he was like, wow, this is the first time I've been able to talk to anyone that really understood this. And I hear that from a lot of people.
How quickly did I open up to you?
Very quickly.
Probably within 2 weeks, honestly.
That's amazing, though, Erica, because it's almost like your calling, your passion just happens. So help us understand your vision. How does this grow, and where does it go from here?
Great question. So one thing that I've been trying to do with the human models is really look at genetic variants. So I'm looking at single nucleotide polymorphisms And we're doing this just by taking buccal swabs or drool collection. So it's very non-invasive, very easy to do. And we're looking at single nucleotide polymorphisms that have already been established that they impact these things. But linking it to the stress, the substance use, and the executive function hasn't been done before. And if I can get that established, then that's something that I can go to clinicians and develop a screen or a tool for, potentially market it.
Mm-hmm.
But if they can screen, say, college students, and you showed up with this COMT variant, which is the enzyme that degrades dopamine, and it makes you more susceptible to impulsivity and addiction. If you screen for that when they're in college, you could set them up on different intervention paths, or like, hey, if you're stressed out, we need to intervene a little bit sooner so we mitigate the risk of dependence later. So let me make it a little more tangible. One aspect of executive function I'm looking at is cognitive flexibility.
Okay.
Or your ability to switch tasks or switch thoughts, which people with ADHD, we can do very quickly, but we don't always get back to where we're at, right? So I'm finding impairments in cognitive flexibility in individuals with early life stress. And it seems like it's being exacerbated by any type of substance use prior to the age of 20. And so I've uncovered that as a phenotype in humans. Now I can go into the rats and figure out exactly where in the brain that might be occurring.
Wow.
And then that just gives you more precision for developing pharmacological interventions in the future.
So if someone is listening right now who is struggling or has a loved one that's struggling, what would you tell them?
You're not alone, and addiction truly is a brain disorder.
That was a huge thing with me. Knowing that, like, 'cause you feel alone. You truly feel alone. You feel very isolated. You feel judged anytime you come out and want to talk to somebody, and that was my biggest turnoff, was feeling judged. If I want, and I wanted help. I did. My parents didn't have the knowledge and the know-how of what to do.
Yeah.
So, but it, like, obviously being with somebody like her, having that background and understanding that she is somebody that I could have turned to and felt okay, because she does not judge a book by its cover at all. And that was, again, one of my biggest turnoffs, was being judged, and especially even going to my parents being judged from that. But
well, that's right. All of us deal with that, right?
Correct.
Right. And that's shame. And that's a whole lot of other tools that are not going to.
we want to be built up
Right.
at that point. I'm already at my essentially lowest point. And like, to feel judged, that just continues to just keep on digging, going deeper and deeper down. So it
has been an interesting place to work in recovery-related science or recovery research, because I am not in recovery. I've just had a lot of people impacted by it in my life.
So you've been watching and observing. So that's got to be kind of hard too. Not that I'm saying you hoped you went through, but yeah, because you're kind of always on the outside.
It's not like outside looking in. It's more like, there are biological differences that we truly haven't uncovered, because I was doing the same thing as all of my friends, and they wound up dead or in jail, and I got a PhD. So I really wanted to know the nitty gritty of our DNA and our biology that was driving some of these differences.
So Erica, can you see a difference in the brain in regards to early life stress versus drugs?
That is a beautiful question, because that's why we use the rodent models. Because typically, if somebody has early life stress, there's like an 80% risk that they're going to use the substance at any point in their life. Doing it with the rodent models allows me to isolate the impacts of the early life stress versus the drugs in their interacting effect.
We didn't really get into defining addiction, and I was sitting here thinking too.
Crap.
Okay.
So, addiction has gone through a transformation in definition as well with the DSM-5. So it used to be, prior to the DSM-5, you were either addicted or not. Now everything is on a continuum. So you have mild, moderate, or severe categorizations of substance use. Instead of making it binary, because then people are like, well, I'm not an addict. I don't need to go and get treatment.
Right.
Now it's like, hey, you went from mild to moderate usage of cannabis in the last year. We might want to intervene on that.
Okay, so let's talk about candy. So my question is, for those things that are a little more commonplace.
Oh, yeah. So the whole reason evolutionarily our dopamine system exists is so it reinforces behaviors that increase our survival. So eating highly palatable foods, reproduction, exercise, all of those things release dopamine because it engages you. And, 100, 200 years ago, you didn't always come across highly palatable foods or really refined sugar. So now we're seeing more of those compulsive like behaviors that are like addiction in these things that we know activate the dopamine system.
Would you still call that addiction?
It is largely referred to as behavioral addictions. Addiction is a word that carries a lot of pejorative weight with it. So we are careful in how we talk about it. But at the end of the day, you know what addiction is. I know what addiction is. So it's easier to just use the words that people are familiar with.
Mm-hmm. And then like the labels, yes.
So it's also in group, out group, which goes into psychology. Like it's okay for him to call himself an addict. Me calling him that, absolutely not okay. So language is a big thing that the field has really leaned into over the last 10 years.
I guess was missing in my
the human element.
Yeah, it's always the humans. So these patterns of addiction, though, does it matter which particular substance is being used?
So there are different patterns of use and different like longitudinal trajectories. Like opiates have the worst rate of relapse and have the highest rate of fatal usage, whereas psychostimulants don't have as much, but it's creeping up. And ironically, it's the baby boomers that are driving a lot of the issues with cocaine usage nowadays.
Wow.
But you will see similar patterns where you'll have intermittent use where you're really chasing the positive reinforcing effects. And then with the neuroadaptations that occur over chronic intermittent use, when you get to the compulsive stage, you're really chasing the negative reinforcement or the alleviation of the withdrawal symptoms. And that comes on faster with opiate users and psychostimulant users.
Okay, so since you study cannabis, let me ask you a question. I mean, people say it's not addictive.
Oh, it is 100% addictive. It not in the classical sense. Okay, so here's the thing, guys. There was a really big debate in the 80s and 90s on whether or not cocaine was addictive because it didn't present in the same way as opiates. So we knew that opiate users, morphine users, opium users would go through physical manifestations of withdrawal, the dry heaving, the nausea, the diarrhea. Cocaine users that were dependent never exhibited very overt signs. It was all in the anhedonia. No one in their right mind would argue that cocaine is not addictive today. It was the same way with cannabis. Like it takes a long time to develop that chronic use disorder. And people just weren't getting there that quickly because it used to be really hard to obtain or it was like really illegal. And people were like, oh, it's not that addictive. I can stop at any time. But now we are seeing a lot of dependence and toxicology reports of cannabis use because, well, they're much more concentrated that you can get now.
And it's more accessible and the frequency.
Way more.
So it sounds like what you're kind of suggesting is almost anything to some extent could become addictive depending upon
anything that activates the dopamine system or really falls into that positive reinforcing thing.
Sure.
It's just addiction is more of the brain disorder, but compulsions are like what you have to do to stop that negative reinforcement.
So scrolling on social media.
Oh, definitely can be an addictive like behavior.
How do you take care of yourself studying all this?
That's a great question. I think that's exactly why I didn't go into counseling because I get compassion fatigue very easily.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to compartmentalize when I'm studying a phenomenon and not a person. I see the value in my own research, so I don't go in and wonder about phosphorylated proteins and like go on that deep. Like I can see the human element in it, and that's what really drives me. I also powerlift with him.
What's your deadlift?
It used to be 305.
What about you, bro?
My best is 635.
Our second date was deadlifting.
I probably will never do that again. But yes, we deadlift and then we go eat a good meal.
Yeah, it's our favorite
We
thing
lift
to do.
and go eat. That's our favorite Sunday date. Seriously.
Korean barbecue, Golden
Doesn't matter.
Corral.
Just a lot of
All
good
you can
food.
eat.
Sushi. It's all good.
Okay, so Erica, I guess, do you guys have any other thoughts that you want to share if we kind of wrap up?
I just wish we had more people like her to give the less fortunate and people who just don't have the know-how to get that information out there. That's just
Garrett
would be
tells
wonderful.
me he wishes he would have had more professors like me. I'm like, they exist. You just
I mean, I have professors that care, but what I see, the way she treats her students, and how far she goes to help them is something special.
My favorite thing about Garrett is he gets so excited to tell people, like, this is my wife. She's a KSU professor. It's like immediate. As soon as he meets
This is
someone.
my wife, Erica. She's a KSU professor and a nurse scientist. Then their jaws drop.
He loves me so much.
What?
It makes it, this is how I take care of myself. When things get bad at work, I just go home and hang out with him.
Which is fine with me, so.
All right. I love you guys. Thank you both for joining us today, and thank you for your honesty. It was absolutely a pleasure. If there's one thing that people should take away from this conversation, what would it be?
It's no longer once an addict, always an addict. Your brain is constantly adapting, and we're trying to figure out how to make it faster.
Beautiful. What about you, Garrett?
It's
I mean, you already said it. I mean, you said it about her, which I think was.
But also, it's like you can change. You got to change, and don't be afraid to ask. Because I wish I knew that, but knowing it now, looking back, I have a whole new outlook, and it's just Don't be scared.
You guys are fun.
Yeah, we do.
The rats don't talk back.
But you get. I can't even imagine.
Oh my God. The first time I had to listen to like doing interviews, clinical interviews, I remember one of the stories and I was like, no, this would never happen with rats.